We're here tonight to talk about scaling with technology and data teams in financial services and fintech. The synopsis reads, data-driven and technological innovation have had an extraordinary impact on financial services and fintech organisations over recent years, from banking, credit and payments to insurance, personal finance and even regulatory matters. But challenges still exist. Progress at scale requires a complex mix of talent and technology, and the right conditions for growth can be difficult for businesses to achieve. Good job that we are joined tonight by an expert panel who are going to discuss this topic in a lot more detail. And I would like to introduce them to you now, or rather, I'd like them to introduce themselves to you now. Marilena.
Hi everyone, I'm Marilena Karanika. I'm the head of data innovation in Experian. My background is in credit risk modeling, and within Experian, essentially we work with a lot of organizations, mostly banks, to help them make the most of their data, focusing on transactional data, open banking, or within their own systems.
Thank you very much. And a big warm welcome to Marilena, please. Robert.
Hi, good evening, folks. My name's Robert Bates, you can call me Rob. I'm at JP Morgan. I head the EMEA team within JP Morgan Wealth Management, who look after client data, client records, client onboarding, managed accounts and personalization in terms of the strategies that our private wealth clients trade. I have a very colourful background, largely within asset management, a lot of fintech background, and I started life as an accountant or trainee accountant rather, who found themselves in the dot-com boom. So it's been quite a wild ride with data and technology, from dot-com to hedge fund, credit crisis, and to where we are now in this very complicated regulatory landscape around data. So that's me.
Thanks, Rob. Vicky.
So I'm Vicky Byram. I am the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Zumo, which is a crypto wallet company based here in Scotland. I've been around data for 20 odd years. You know when it starts getting a bit embarrassing about how many odd years it is, and it's like 25. I cut my teeth in statistics, working for the NHS. Then I spent a long time in banking. I then went into consultancy, and I've worked with a huge range of data science projects, from autonomous robots in the North Sea to BI requirements for VW, which were interesting. I'd say I've been in FinTech now for the last couple of years, heading up the data teams there. So that's doing everything from infrastructure to running the data teams to governance, etc. So that's me.
I just realised we didn't give Rob a big warm welcome after his struggles in getting here. So we need a double one for Rob and Vicky. Yay! And last but not least, Gordon.
Thank you. Nice to see you all. So I'm Gordon Jackson. I'm from Natwest Bank, or RBS, or Coots, which is a collection of brands. So I'm the head of personalisation products, part of the data analytics group for Natwest. So my role is, how do we use all the data and understanding that we've got about our customers, which we've got 60 million customers, so we've got a lot of data, so how do we use that to create personalised experiences for customers and whenever we interact with them. So my background is a mix of fin fraud analytics, fin crime analytics, delivery, transformation, operations, some strategy roles, but for the last 7 years I've been in running analytics programs or building out that sort of capability for the bank.
Thank you very much. Warm welcome to Gordon, please. So, let me kick off. So the first little area we're going to look at is the building of data and technology teams around strategic business priorities. And the little subheading I've got for this one is, let's start by talking a little bit about data, innovation and impact. And impact and purpose are two things that we hear an awful lot at the moment, which is to do with most organisations have to clearly articulate that purpose and impact in order to kind of position themselves as an employer of choice. Marilena, in which areas within financial services or fintech organisations can data-driven technological innovation deliver the biggest impact? And I heard you talking about this recently, so that's why I'm coming to you first. So biggest impact, innovation.
I want to say everywhere because, no, because innovation doesn't have to be this really out-of-the-box really cool thing is just essentially making sure that you're finding a problem that you can't solve, saying, do you have the data, do you have the tools, and solving it. So we've seen a lot of different areas in organizations that is like credit risk teams, that they're using data that they haven't previously used, like transactional data, to cherry pick the people that were marginal declines. We've seen that in HR departments, HR analytics, in terms of getting a better understanding and streamlining their processes around validating employment for people that they're trying to employ at that point in time. We've seen that in personalization as well, just making sure that companies are doing the most with the data that they have to provide tailored services and not be very off the mark when they're serving the customers. And like most recently with the cost of living, there's so much data out there to make sure that different customer segments are supported differently because they're impacted differently. We need different resources to handle call centers, different resources to address these like payment holidays and so on. So there are so many areas that making the most of the existing data can lead to innovation.
Okay. Robert, would you like to kind of run with that one from your own experience? Where have you seen the biggest impact for innovation having an impact? Where have you seen it happening best?
I suppose it's more the approach to the place I'd comment on, is that we look at ways to do things and ways to automate things. So whether it's, taking a recent experience of mine on how long it takes to onboard a very wealthy individual to a firm, for example. If you know any wealthy individuals, or if you are any wealthy individuals on here, you'll know that when you apply to a bank, it's not just a matter of where your address is and, do you have a salary or that kind of thing. It's very much about who do you know, where did you get your money from, where do you live? And all of these things take a long time to kind of validate and then, bring you on as a customer. So in firms like ours, we have these complicated processes that have evolved over generations to be able to automate processes. And coming back to your question, is that we very often look at how we innovate or how we improve based on the lens of what we've done before. And I think where we can take a completely different approach and almost throw away all the kind of conventional thinking and remove our human bias from the processes that we study and look at, I think that's very clever. And there's a lot of innovation. If you look at manufacturing, if you look at autonomous vehicles, there's a lot of very interesting stuff around innovation that's happened in that space. But when it comes to traditional office-based automation and office processes, we don't think of those environments like a manufacturing floor or a logistics floor in an Amazon warehouse, how they do their robots. And I'm sorry stealing your time here, but I did an exercise with my son the other day. He's on the autistic spectrum, he looks at things very differently, and we're trying to figure out where he will fit as an individual in the workplace. And patterns is his thing. And we had a look at making a peanut butter and jam sandwich. How can you get a machine to make a peanut butter and jam sandwich for us? And most of us will think of the sequential steps that we need to go through. But if you just gave the steps to the machine and said, this is what you need to do before this step, and this is what you need to do after this step, you can figure it out. And I think there's a lot of innovation when we cast away our kind of traditional mindsets. And I think what I'm trying to advocate within my teams, and I just need to take a breath now because I'm running out of oxygen, is don't think about how things have been done. Think about what we can do. And this is why I love working with graduates within this space, is because they don't have all the 20-odd years of legacy that I have. And I think there's a huge amount of latent innovation sitting with, young people coming out of university who don't have the legacy that we have. And I think that's a huge agent of change.
Okay, Vicky, on that, we can either run with agents of change, because I know you've been an agent of change. We can stick on that original question. Either, in what areas within financial services or fintech can data-driven tech derive the biggest impact? Or, as an agent of change yourself, where have you delivered the biggest impact?
I deliver impact wherever I go. It's all the similar theme, I think. It's one of those ones of being on a panel, you just don't want to keep on adding, but it's evolution, revolution, isn't it? Yeah. And I think, especially within FinTech, there's been a lot of evolution, and analytics has worked really well, financial crime, risk, it's customer profiling, etc. All of them have been kind of a slow evolution, and analytics has really helped there. I think where the revolution has come in is maybe more around how analytics is interacting with customers. So because I'm at a data meetup, who hasn't played with Chat GPT, right? Yeah. Absolutely none of us. I could
be the guy, right?
Yeah,
no,
so if you have not,
I
no.
broke it.
Exactly. But there's now an expectation from our customer base, no matter whether it's an enterprise or your retail customers, that analytics will be part of their experience. And I think that's probably like the biggest impact and change that I've seen during my time, and where analytics is doing really well.
Gordon, would you like to run with that one? Innovation and impact.
Yeah, innovation and impact. If I look back maybe 3 years, as a bank, we have such richness of data on our customers, so how they're navigating around their pages, how they're spending money, and it was such. So we've got 60 million customers, tens of millions of transactions per day, but we were never in a point, even 3 years ago, where we felt we had either the access to that data or the capability or the technology to be able to analyse it deeply, which is what's moved on massively in the last 2-3 years. So we started a digital kind of spin up inside the bank, which was actually if we can't get that data right now, or we don't have the scale to be able to do it, what if we set something up where we, at that point, open banking meant that you could consent and then share your data through open banking. So we created a little piece of tech in a startup called Mimo, which meant that customer consents to give their transactions. We then take that transaction through, that we can then build some transaction enrichment service on top of it, and then start to build some regular payment models on top of that. And then from that, you can then create a deep view of actually how the customers are spending money, which then allows you to then say, how could we help you save? And not save to the means of, because we think you can offer you a mortgage or a credit card, that we can do that, but we can actually do it in ways to say, actually, it looks like you're spending X on your energy bills. Maybe not now, but back then you could say, actually, we think you could save by switching. It looks like you've been there for X number of months, so you're coming up to switch period. There's a whole deep range of things. You can take that as far as saying, actually, it looks like you're gambling X% of your income on a monthly basis. Is there ways that we can help you, or can we offer support?
I noticed something recently about that.
So we're doing huge things now, which is actually using that to shift to a more engagement-based conversation with our customer, rather than you show up to your bank and then they try and push you a product, because that's not really building any trust or kind of engagement at that point. So that's something that we've gone from, so a digital startup to then through open banking to then actually over time scaling that up for our own data assets that we hold about our customers. So we've built this big transaction enrichment and insights engine, which we use to have lots of conversations with our customers now through a mobile app. So something that started small and then went from a point that you couldn't do anything to now something that's now scaled across the organisation. So it's a big part of what our strategy is.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on and look a little bit at this idea around the organisational strategic imperative and how that can be best addressed by data and technology. So Robert, to you, sir, or Rob, sorry, I'm a Rob too. Are you Robert when you're in trouble?
Bob.
Yeah. Oh, I'm Bob in here sometimes. Yeah. Right, data strategy. What should an effective data technology strategy include, and what considerations or concessions should be made with regards to aligning this to overall organisational strategy? What compromises need to be made, if any?
Within our environment, like you were saying earlier on, we've got tons of information, but we can't work with a lot of this information. You need governance over the information. You need to be able to tell who's seen it. We need to meet a whole bunch of regulatory requirements in terms of what we can and can't see. And I think something you were saying earlier on, if you've got a plan of what you need to do, you can begin to build some of these very small projects, if you will, that tick off some of these things. Because for us, for example, there's so many moving parts that you need to accommodate at once that it becomes almost impossible to move forward. So, like what Natwest did with that product is a really innovative way. And I think that's kind of the route that I would advocate as well, to be able to understand the kind of restrictions regime that lives around you and work within that. And one of the things that is a bit of a double-edged sword is working with fintech startups or kind of new fintechs that solve a particular problem and bring it into a very big enterprise landscape, because the true scale, the amount of data that you need to work with sometimes becomes a bit of a challenge. But the actual thing that you need to be able to scale is, how do we get enough people access to this data in a very quick and efficient way that you meet all the regulatory obligations. And I think for us, almost that administrative challenge is a bigger one than the technology and accessing the technology.
Okay. And Vicky, for you, an effective data technology strategy, what should it include? What considerations or concessions do you need to make? I mean, and I'm coming at this from a layman's perspective. I know that you want to do stuff, but there are then rules that, to your point, you have to play within the rules. Where can you push the envelope, and where are the compromises?
So I think like a data tech strategy doesn't start by just talking to your data team and asking them what they want, because they want the bells and whistles, and why not? If you don't ask, you don't get. Your data tech strategy has to be really heavily aligned with your overall business objectives, which sounds kind of a bit, I don't know, it's one of those sort of throwaway statements, but a lot of organizations say they want to be data driven. They don't want to be data driven. They want to have data supporting a lot of what they do. To be data driven, you're not going to be spending all of your time looking at PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets and shipping data manually around your organization. And that takes a lot of investment to move from that to somewhere where you're just reacting on alerts and almost the lights are out. There's very, very few fully data-driven organizations. So I think, first of all, you need to work out, where are you going to go deep on data and where are you going to go light? And you make that as everyone's staring at each other in the eyes and they make that commitment. And then it comes down to then a delivery of that objective people, process, tech. So the people side, you've got to think of your upstream consumers of the data, your data teams, then your marketing functions, finance functions, your customers even, and regulators you've spoken about then. But I think one area that sometimes gets forgotten about within this kind of looking at the people who are using the data, what about the people who are actually creating the data? And fintechs, I think, are a space at the moment where, we build all of these artificial intelligence algorithms based on data, which then breaks all the time. And it's like this idea that there is no one who's really tackling that well. There's a movement, obviously, with data contracts, with the software developers, which I work very closely with my software development team to kind of embed those. But that's just the software development team. The marketing team, they may want to swatch in and out their technology. We need to be able to manage that really well, and that becomes kind of like the initial part of the data coming into our environment. I think then it's a little bit around the processes. So as Gordon was mentioned here, that it's the idea of, you can go around in organizations and work out what your use cases are, right? So I'll use that model there and I'll use that orchestration here. But the actual data tech strategy needs to be based on what's reusable and what's accessible, and making things accessible. So you have to find the commonalities and then work your strategy around them. And then finally, there's a little bit around, legacy tech that you have to embed into, or if you're a fintech, your budgetary constraints. So, there's always going to be some form of limiting factors, plus your skill set that you've got within your organisation as well. So I think it's kind of align to your business objectives and then do a people, process, tech review.
Thank you very much. So we've got our first question in from the audience. Gordon, this one's for you. We'll start with you. You are the panel. What does the panel feel is more important when looking to deliver impact? Business growth priorities or customer experience? Thank you very much, whoever asked the question. Gordon.
Good question. I don't think it's an or. Would be my opening thing. I think customer experience improvements drives growth. Certainly in banking, I think if you're not focusing on an improved experience, then it's going to be difficult for you to either acquire you might acquire customers, but you won't retain them, and you won't probably grow your share of what they have with you. So I don't think it's, my opening thing would be, I don't think it's an or. So I think I guess that links to what Vicky and Robert were talking about when it comes to what your strategy is. It's got to be, I think it's got to be done in partnership with, whether it's different business areas or we organise around kind of customer goals and the different teams that support them. So it's got to be, there's a kind of partnership that's got to be actually what's the strategy and the tech and the tooling that we're trying to create, and then what are the different experiences that we'll then use that for. And I think if you end up with something that's just like a technology strategy without that, then it doesn't go very far. So yeah, I think I just don't see it as an or. I think it's trying to create those use cases or experiences that demonstrate the difference within the strategy and the tooling that you're creating. I think that's what we've seen work.
Very diplomatic answer, sir. Marilyn, I'm going to put you on the spot. It is an or. You've got to choose one. The question reads, what do the panel feel is more important when looking to deliver impact? Business growth priorities or customer experience? Where would you go first?
So I tend to agree, to be fair, but just to cause some of the discussions, I would say starting with customer experience and looking at examples. I'm not advocating necessarily for them, but we've seen that with like buy now, pay later. Adoption, very wide, very massive. They were obviously tailored and catering to what customers needed at that point. I'm not going to go into the whole discussion about how they are regulated and so on. Steps are being taken, but the adoption is like very high. We're talking about almost 60% of the millennials. We're talking more than 35% of the overall UK population. Thinking about other initiatives, for example, open banking has been around for 5 years, still about 15% of the UK population adoption. And that's probably because it's not very directly linked to the customer experience at this point. It hasn't been communicated to the wider audience what the potential benefits are. So getting the value across to consumers is the first step to getting growth.
Okay. Robert?
I would agree with that, because having customers who are sticky drives growth.
Yep.
So it is the cart before the horse, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Vicky?
I'm in a fintech's scale-up, so it's just all about growth now. For me, it has to be the right customer experience, otherwise you haven't got a product.
Yeah.
So but however, there is also the bit of you can make the shiniest, most beautiful thing, but however, if you're not selling it, you're not paying the people that you're working with. So, it has to be an even balance between the two.
Okay, so anonymous, the answer is an even balance between the two. Thank you. Tandy has got a question for us. I don't know if this is, well, if anybody wants to step up on this one, volunteer, please take the lead. What advice would you give to social enterprise business that is growing into debt? What kind of data do they need to prioritise for a debt recovery strategy? Anybody want to run with that one?
you bring in the big consultants to ask that question.
Tandy, do you want to expand on the question?
Yeah, it's just to find out from yourselves, from your own experiences when you're working in your various industries, if the business is not making money and you're going into deficit, what kind of data do you want to prioritize and how can you use that to get yourselves back on the road, really? So it could be a product that you've worked on, or it could be your teams, for example.
So, can you explain your questions? Maybe explain your situation and we can make, or
so there's a social
situation.
enterprise business that's driving into debt as time goes by, and they're collecting data, but it turns out they don't even understand their data. They don't know which data they should prioritize to move out of debt, for example. So that's, I just wanted to get your mindset around a situation like that.
I would say that it's obviously spending money in order to achieve certain objectives. And it almost seems a bit oversimplistic to say this, but financial control within social enterprise or any kind of public enterprise business is absolutely critical, because whether those people who are funding your business, whether it comes from local government or private individuals, want to know that there's good governance in terms of how that money is spent. And I would say is obviously there's a mission to the social enterprise in terms of who they're supporting and who the community is. If there's not a connection between the financial control and delivery of services to the people, it just means it becomes a funding exercise for the people involved in that organization. So I would say look at the traditional accounting financial controls, and is there any positive correlation to the services that have been delivered?
Something to add here on the data component, and it's not bespoke to the specific organization, it's just a general one. Gathering data takes effort, takes time, and that takes effort and time away from something else. My suggestion is always to think, what data do you need for what you're aiming for, and only collect that. Gathering more data than is needed, it's a pain. on so many levels, it's a pain. So my suggestion would also be, before going out and collecting different types of data, think, what do I need to make a decision or to better understand the situation? Is it where I'm spending money? Is it employers, working hours, buildings, products, and so on? And then focus the data collection on that.
Making sense, Dandy?
Yeah, it does make sense. Thank you.
No worries, thank you
But I
very
think
much.
one of the things like a data for social enterprise is establishing what your KPIs are. I think that's probably going to be your hardest part. So go back to your original objective of why you set it up in the first place and try and establish what those KPIs you should be tracking. If you can then do any sort of return on the investment against those KPIs, then that's probably going to keep your investors happy for a period.
Well, that's it. I guess it's the trustees or the backers. Do they still buy into the purpose or the vision of what you're trying to do, and how do you get that? How do you maintain that support? I think that happens in your kind of industry. It happens within bigger organisations where you're starting to do things. Is there still a reason? Is there still a clear purpose of why you're trying to do it? Is there a payback? And that payback might not be financial, but it's making sure that you've got that support and kind of reset whether you still have that or not.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's an opportune moment to just ask if there are any other questions from the audience, either hands in the air type, just say questions old school style, or use this fancy robot gadget thing. Anybody? Yes, sir, at the back.
Maybe for Robin, but from a bank's point of view, if you're integrating with FinTechs or SaaS providers, they would love to get their hands on all of your data. How do you manage the level of access you give to third parties to your data, so that things like GDPR
Sure.
in mind?
Sure. Well, that's a good question, because it sits at the heart of one of our ever-evolving strategy. So as part of open banking, we created a lot of things around open banking compliance, so making sure that you can provide access to your so customer data or transaction data if consent was given. And what we found through that is it's developed an API strategy inside the organisation, which is actually there's a lot of capabilities that we have already or that we can create, which you can make available externally either for research or to try and commercialise. But the important thing is we're not commercialising customer data. What you're trying to commercialise is the IP that you've created on top of it. So we've got a range of things just now through it's called the Bank of APIs, which is go online, search for Natwest Bank of APIs, and there's a whole catalogue of APIs that are available that organisations can use, and we're looking to partner and grow that, and that includes some of our internal startups like Free Agent is our kind of digital bookkeeping service that we offer. There's a growing catalogue of things, because what our strategy is, if we are creating products or APIs, then we make them available internally to improve some sort of customer journey or experience. But when we make them available internally, we also build them in a way that they can be offered externally. So they're all going to be available through Bank of APIs. So even in my team, we've created that transaction categorization view that we've created, our enrichment service, that's available on Bank of APIs just now. It categorises our transactions, and then we'll get to the point in the new year where any bank can pass us it, and then we can categorise it and send it back. So it's useful for like affordability, lending decisions. We're also built a carbon scoring model on top of that again, which will make available externally. So yeah, that's how we're kind of, and it's a big growing part of our organisation, because we recognise that we've got a big data set and we're growing capability that we're able to build things on top of, and actually it gives you a big training set to tune on, which other people don't have. So yeah, Bank of APIs online, have a look, and if there's things on there that you think is interesting that's not on there, then we should have a chat.
Okay, Rob.
From a kind of practical perspective, we have there are a number of fintechs that we've recently acquired, in fact, but we're looking to integrate into our product offering to our customers. And some of these fintechs are still relatively autonomous, serving other people. And one of the big challenges we have is, like I was saying earlier on, is how can we retain the governance over the data, just in terms of where it is, who has access to it, where we locate the data, and the multiple jurisdictions that we have a footprint in. What are the data requirements within all of those different jurisdictions? Yeah. So we do have situations where we can't have data leaving Europe, or it can't go to this jurisdiction or something like that. So I think what we tend to do is almost ingest those resources into the firm as a general rule. So big banks have all the processes in place to onboard numerous consultants and provide them with workspaces to be able to process the data and do the work and things like that. So that's very much a problem an approach that we take, which gets us away from figuring out how do we take sensitive information and give it to a customer. When we have to integrate with as-a-service type offerings, that becomes sometimes tricky. If we can remove the sensitivity to GDPR type of information to those systems, it makes it very much easier. Otherwise, we bind the fintech themselves in a mountain of paperwork and the organisation themselves.
Okay with that?
I don't know if I just articulated the problems that you're facing already.
Can I maybe ask which side of the fence are you on, and is it because I've sat both sides, so it'd be interesting.
Yeah, so from a SaaS point of view, so I work for a digital consultancy, and we've got SaaS partners, and we're financial services experts, so we sit on pretty much on both sides, where we can club the two together. But one of the areas where we see a lot of friction is how much access to the data do you get, and like you said, talking about jurisdictions. Well, if you get someone who's hosting data in Dublin, are they allowed to transfer it to San Francisco to process. There's wealthy individuals who bank in Luxembourg, are they allowed to move that data back to the UK because individuals don't like to see that. So it's just trying to find out some of the strategies around how you ring fence that data or how you allow access to that data. Because I think generally speaking, fintechs and SaaS providers get their hands on as much data as they can, right? Because it does help.
I suppose it has to be a symbiotic relationship as well. So the fintechs are obviously going to the larger organisations to get that market share, to get the volume through whatever it is that they're providing. And to do that completely blind, it makes them basically sort of sucker against the teat, doesn't it really? Because then there's no information that they're getting to grow their business anywhere else. So it has to be some kind of like beneficial on both sides. I think one thing that you'd need to check definitely is like your legal contracts with the customers that you hold data on, because if you become a controller versus a processor from a GDPR perspective, you need to go out and notify your clients and get them to sign up all over again, which might make a load of them drop out, and that would then damage your own book. And I think another thing with that is just maybe there's anonymization of the data, aggregation of the data. That could be something that you could share back to the fintechs to say this type of person, this profile of person is using this whatever it is, and that might be sufficient for them right now, rather than giving them the individual customer detail.
Okay.
I would add just one thing to that. And this is a purely personal point of view, it's got no reflection to anyone I've ever worked with before, is that it also, a big factor in is, where does the data that you're working with or the product that you're doing, the data has been sourced? Because if the big financial services business, the bank or whoever, is providing you with information to be able to, for them to be able to get a service, it's a very different prospect. Where if the fintech is engaging, collecting the information, processing it, and passing it back to the bank, they're very different when it comes to what you can and can't do. I think you have far more license in terms of what you can do if you're the source of the information as part of that service to the banking institution.
Can I add one last thing? It's also where the data sits. So we work with a lot of organizations. Being a data provider, we work with a lot of organizations, and some of them are quite happy to share data with us under very, very lengthy contracts. But there have been instances that they were like, oh, we don't feel comfortable with the data leaving our environment. And it's a matter of finding a solution that might address that key concern, because most of the time it's not, we don't want you to work with our data, is that we're legally bounded to not have that leave our premises. So for example, when we've had that discussion with one of the bigger organizations, we've deployed our product onto their cloud system. So the data never left their cloud, but they still got the benefits of that service. So it's finding a middle ground that would address the concerns, but also provide like the good customer service.
Can I ask just a follow-up question? It's probably for yourself. So it's really great to hear bank of APIs. I guess maybe this is a question then for all of you. Given the problems associated with sharing data, which are typically big hurdles to overcome from many different aspects, but going down the route of an API strategy puts the onus on the bank to go through all of those procedures before the data is released into the wild. How many of you are looking at API strategies? I know you might be looking at API strategies to share data internally, and that's a benefit obviously, but are you also looking at being able to use APIs and have all of that infrastructure pre-built in order that the fintechs can plug in?
I've done that in a previous organisation, yeah.
We have that currently live in a very similar setting to like Google Store with a private subscription rather than anyone can go and download it. But essentially, when we work with an organization, we send them a link and they can fire queries at our API within a controlled environment. We don't have access to the data, so we can't look at it. They get access to it directly.
And so, how do you think there are enough there? That's enough APIs there, because organizations, fintechs, are still pitching up to to large FS organizations looking for data? And if the answer's not in the API, then it means you've got to go through another route. Do you think the answer then needs to be there needs to be more APIs? And is the future going to be, is we're going to have a lot more APIs in the marketplace or not, do you think?
I think, well, there's a massive rise in alt data in general. If you look at, so the two big data warehouse providers, Snowflake, Redshift, both of them have this ability to share like part of your data warehouse almost immediately. So it's no physical transfer of data. It's not even an API call. It's literally your data warehouse appears within someone else's environment. Now, obviously, it has to be fully de-anonymized. It has to be aggregated, etc. But even that trend information is massively useful for investment houses for looking at kind of like trends of businesses. So for a fintech, it becomes an additional monetization strategy for them. So why wouldn't you do it? I think there has to be there's these marketplaces that are available, and they're really easy to sign up to as well. And you can specify exactly who you want to interact with, who you want to release your data to. You go into individual contracts with organizations who are picking up your data. So you can make it free or you can charge for it. That's all, that infrastructure already exists. So Snowflake Marketplace and Redshift Marketplace as well.
And AWS Marketplace.
AWS, yeah.
Listen, thank you also for the questions, brilliant. But anonymous came in from anonymous. What is the biggest drawback of growth? I love this. So, Vicky.
Dilution of culture all the time.
Because we're just about to move on to growing and scaling teams. So let's move on there. Brilliant segue. So the biggest drawback of growth is dilution of culture. Yeah, I think it becomes an effort, a real effort to make sure that you can keep that culture alive. And going, what's it? The tipping point is between. So I can't remember. There was some study between like 50 and 70, and the culture starts going a bit haywire at that point, just because I think you start losing the common enemy. But that will always be a thing. So you have to have incredibly strong values that are really, you instill that into person from day one. You make sure that you've got the right ambassadors and advocates out. You spend a lot of time with your teams to really promote that culture. And you live it yourself. So reasons why I'm here, reasons why the rest of my team go out and they go on the road is because we're all about education, transparency. So it's really important for us. So I would say that's probably the biggest issue. Okay, so the dilution of culture. Gordon, what about you?
I agree that at digital startup that we created inside, actually the way we did that, we did it as it had its own brand name. Almost people. When people joined, they were joining Nemo. They weren't joining Natwest. There was a clear mission behind it, which was we're going to, in a real product-based mentality. We're creating this product for this mission, and that the culture within that team was probably one of the best cultures I've ever been part of, I think. And then so what we've ended up kind of evolving and pivoting what it was doing and then scaling it, but then still trying to keep that culture and identity of the team, which has been hard because it then changes shape, it grows, it gets bigger, and then you gather up that you've kind of got that core mission that you started with, but then you kind of, in a big organisation, you start adding extra things. Oh, we could do this as well for them, we could do this for them as well. So it becomes harder, but trying to keep that culture, and again, what Vicky said, like keeping consistency. You want people to move around and do different things, but you need to keep that core of people around to be able to kind of continue that culture, I think, and then just add the right people into it. But yeah, that's the biggest challenge within an organisation. But in a large organisation, I think as well, is like trying to keep, like we're trying to build and maintain like a real product-based mentality. So you're trying to build something end to end, as opposed to doing a part in something that's bigger than you actually feel that you're contributing to.
Marilena?
Sorry, I've got a follow-up question just to what you were saying. Do you have stats on the retention policy, the retention of people within MENA and the attrition compared to Natwest?
So it now feels more like part of Natwest than it did. our attrition, the challenge is the skills within that team are everything that's hot in the market.
Yeah.
Just now, data scientists, data engineers,
MLOps.
MLOps, software developer on cloud, you know. But we still we're running below 10% in that area. And in other areas, we're in our kind of data and analytics groups with similar kind of makeups are probably between closer to the 15%. So it's definitely we've lost some great people, but we've managed to keep the core of it, and our attrition rate generally runs lower than in others. You feed the staff. We obviously like to run a staff opinion survey as well, and actually the scores are way out as well around engagement and purpose.
Excellent.
Marlena.
I would imagine it'd be an interesting thing what you guys have done with Chase.
It's
as well. That's obviously a bigger scale, but
it's exactly the same scenario. Yeah.
Just giving them a couple of
Yeah.
seconds.
We'll get them a couple of beers. We can just sit and listen. It's cool. Anything else from that culture?
Yeah, so for me, and it links to the skills and the culture of the team, if you keep chasing growth, that has the risk of not maintaining the product appropriately and not making it robust, because you can't keep growing and growing and growing and not having people focusing on, making it more stable, making it fast, refactoring the code. So looking at the skills of a team, and that's one of the great things of having a diverse team, is you're looking at skills gaps. You won't have people that go after the sign a new technique and they come up with a lot of ideas and they go, can we try this, can we try that? But you also want the people to go, what's the benefit of this? Why do we need to change that? Or people that enjoy documentation, enjoy refactoring code, enjoy making existing code more readable, enjoy documentation. So it's just that balance of skill set that keeps a product stable while it's growing, and also keeps the team engaged, because they can balance each other out.
Okay.
Haven't lost anyone in the last 2.5 years. Please don't poach my team.
But one of the things on the back of that kind of reminds me of a couple of experiences that I've been through is when you building out a new team and a new product, you kind of, and it also depends on who the founding kind of people are. It very much sets the identity and the kind of direction for a while. But often you tend to find you hire people that are multi-skilled, that are able to do a lot of things and can stay motivated across all these different tasks. So you might have someone who's doing SRE and they're doing MLOps and they're doing a whole bunch of things. And as the product matures, so things slow down a little bit, and these people can't do all of these different things. And now you need to hire people who are passionate about documentation. And the nature of the people that you hire as you scale changes. And recognizing that you need to hire a different profile of person as the team grows is the challenge, and knowing how to handle that challenge, and it can be a bit of an art rather than a science. And I think that is the biggest challenge, is how do you maintain an identity when your profile of person that you're hiring is slightly changing.
That's Adam Socra's, the unicorn-shaped people, but when they leave unicorn-shaped holes.
Yep.
And it's kind of when they're doing a bit of data engineering and a bit of analytics and a bit of BI, plus they'll make the tea. It's kind of all of that stuff, which in a startup is incredibly important.
Which is the challenge that we get hit with all the time, is that the person has been in the organisation for 5 years. They were hired to look like that. In 5 years, they've accrued so many other different skills and experiences and abilities. But could you replace them? No, we can't. No, that's unique. That's a unicorn. But listen, staying on this, you'll be not surprised that a talent guy wants to stay on this particular little hobby horse. So, Rob, I'm actually going to look at you for this one. Can the biggest challenge to scaling your team be unreceptive or out of touch HR people strategies? If so, what solutions? Right. So this is something that we find a lot, that we talk to business unit owners, we talk to business leaders, we talk to people who go, I know what I want, I know how to get it, go and get me some of that. But then there are things that come in the way. So what solutions are there to that challenge? For fintechs, purpose and impact are all very well, but how do you compete with the giants? So we want to look at it either from the larger corporate organisation getting stymied by internal process, or for fintech organisations, perhaps, how does David compete with Goliath? Because somebody's asked, how can fintechs compete with larger financial institutions when looking to attack and retain talent? How do we level the playing field?
I would actually say that over the last, particularly post-COVID, fintechs had an edge over the larger organisations.
Okay.
In the hiring that we've done, depending on if a fintech is relatively well funded, they've got a sexy product, it's very difficult to compete. When you're a large organisation and I have to hire 20 Java developers that are going to be doing very Java-related stuff. Within the fintech, they're going to be doing something that appears more sexy, and they're going to be earning the same wage. So there's not that much of a difference. So I would say we were competing against the fintechs in order to hire good talent, and particularly in Scotland. I think fintechs have a more global reach in the sense of talent. A lot of people are hiring people all across Europe, all across the world. And have been, doing hybrid working or completely remote working for the last 10 years. Yeah. With those kind of things coming into the fore, I would say they were our biggest competitor as a, enterprise firm hiring good talent.
So with that and the challenge of perhaps, to your point originally, that sometimes it can be the HR and the people strategy, how have you combated that? How have you managed to compete?
And you have to be creative, and you can't fight a machine. Okay. So it's like you can't swim against the current. So you need to figure out how the thing's going to work. And the people within, particularly within JP Morgan, in our HR recruitment function, most of them all came from smaller recruiting firms before, understand how things work, but are also constrained by the process and the regulation and things that we have to go through. But I think it doesn't help to get buy-in from significantly senior people within the organisation. But if the recruitment team in a large firm feel like you're working against them, you're dead in the water. You have to work with them. You can go a little bit off-piste, if you will. I know, Michael could testify to some of the struggles that I've had in working with you guys to get certain things done. But I think, for me, the secret was being persistent, being a little bit creative, but working with the HR function. Yeah. As soon as you fight against them, it's not going.
Yeah, okay. Gordon, from your perspective, so either that the initial question, which was all around that HR people strategy and whether or not it constricts growth, but also whether or not there are creative ways that you can compete against the perceived smaller, more agile fintech organisations. How have you done it?
I get similar to Rob. I guess we've had our challengers are either some of our great people going to work for a fintech because they're offered share incentives, etc., or more, I guess, more control of what they're doing, so as part of something smaller. So I guess clearly there's a big guy like Facebook and Google and stuff. We lose people too. So I think they're stressed out because I guess it's a competitive market, and if people want more money or whatever they're driving for, there's always going to be somebody that will pay more. So I think I guess what we've tried to do is make our proposition stronger, both in how we reward people, but then also the things that they're working on. We've done a massive push on, and Vic and I were chatting about earlier, a massive push on data scientists and data engineer recruitment. I think over the last 18 months we've brought in 400 data scientists and data engineers, and that was clearly extremely difficult at certain points. So there's a lot we decided to get. It wasn't working the way we were doing it before, which was to rely on fully kind of the HR, all the adverts that we had, the CVs coming in, the CV sifting done, and then you kind of keep pushing people through. So we create, as we like to do, we create a program around it. But it was a lot about just taking the people, so we're taking our data scientists, the recruiting managers closer to the CVs, and then just being more ruthless. We set up certain things where we would do Kaggle tests and things like that along the way, so you kind of rule people out earlier. And yeah, it was just like it was a massive effort, and it became probably a bigger slice of what people were trying to do than maybe what they expected it to be at the time. But we had a kind of clear point of it. This is what we want to do and why when we needed to do it. So yeah, I think but I guess in the other challenge you have with the big organisation is when somebody joins, it can be difficult, or they join with a view and then of maybe where they came from, and then they get into the organisation. It's like, what do you mean it's going to take me this long to get access? What do you mean I'm not going to be working on this technology? So you have to make sure, there's no point just like being really aggressive at bringing people in. You've got to make sure that experience once they join is better, because people just switch off within the first month or 2 months if actually the things they're working on is crap, or they're not got the tools to do the job they want to do. So I think it has to be both, bring people in, but then create that good joining experience, and then keep the stimulation up on what they're working on.
That's key, because you know, any firm, whether it's a fintech or a large firm, can spend a lot of effort on events and promotions and that great sell. And you know, when you start, you get the hoodie and the laptop and the backpack.
And the water bottle. Got to remember the water bottle.
But then there's that vacuum that happens behind that, as you were saying. And if you don't continue that, and someone will say, you know, I joined JP Morgan and it was all wonderful, and I started and I twiddled my thumbs for 3 months getting going. And that kind of spreads to other people. And so that continuity of that, meaning what you say almost, and following through on that promise is really key.
Okay.
Something as well, but it doesn't necessarily create a split between fintechs and larger organizations, but it happens more frequently on larger organizations, is how long the processes take. With fintechs, you're usually like one, maybe a second interview, you've met the team, you get the offer, not get the offer, that's pretty much it. With larger organizations, and again, there's a big separation between different companies there as well. Some take painfully long to reply to the application.
Oh, tell me all about it.
Get all the people that are needed in the room for the interview, provide feedback, make sure that they interview 12 people, which is like a lot. you shouldn't have to interview 12 people for a job. By the time that you've interviewed the 12th person, the person that you really like is out of the market. So that's a difference that I've seen when working in larger organizations compared to...
That's been great for us, actually, because we were losing candidates left, right, and center. You know, we would do the 12 interviews and the 2 months to kind of think about whether this person actually had all the tick boxes or whatever. And by the time we go, oh, okay, we're ready for the interview, they go, well, they're good, they've been accepted. So that was great. It kind of lit a fire under us a little bit. I've now tried to kind of instill with the hiring managers within my group to basically take the point of, when you see a CV that seems promising, that comes across your desk, if we aren't in a position within a week, 2 weeks maximum to place an offer, that's too long.
Yes.
And you have to go through, and you don't need 20 people. And the other thing that I've helped, particularly with a bigger organization, when you've got, you need all the job specs going out. If the information on the job spec isn't exactly the same as the criteria that you're going to review that person when it comes to their annual review or quarterly review or whatever, it's wrong. It needs to tie up, because the person's starting the job based on these criteria. It should be the same criteria that you measure them, whether they're successful, whether they're doing what you need to do, and things like that. Very often, the job specs are very bland. Great team player. What does great team player mean? I haven't seen a definition of great team player. Or, knowledgeable of the latest market trends. How on earth is that a criteria of something? So we have a lot of fluff in these things, but if you distill it to, this is why we want you, and this is how we're going to measure your success. And in the same way, the candidate can measure the employee to say, well, you employed me on these basis. I think I've done this job. It's a good conversation.
Going to hold you there, Rob, because a question's just come in that I really like. Anonymous at the bottom. So I get you guys are all doing different things, different roles in different organisations. However, what are some of the main tick boxes that you look for in your recruits? And can you overlook some of these boxes? And I will start the question off with this. What I hear, what I see is, forget the tech, that can be taught. There are certain core fundamental characteristics, behavioural traits, something that we all look for. What are those things? Marilena.
So I completely agree that everything can be learned, but the willingness to learn new things should be there. And you can see that and understand that very easily in an interview, whether they're interested in learning about the world. So something that I always look at when I'm interviewing people is whether they can explain something that I'm not familiar with and they're very knowledgeable about in a simple way that I can understand it. So you get, like, it doesn't have to be a topic that I want. So I don't go, can you explain how neural network? It might not be their strongest point. Have you worked on a project? Have you worked on a master's thesis, a PhD thesis, anything that you've done in the past? Pick one and explain to me what you did. And you can get the communication skills from that. Can they convey to someone who's not in the middle of that project what that was about, what the output was, what their contribution was, what the benefits to the business were?
So we're looking at willingness to learn. We're looking at ability to communicate complex thoughts or tasks in
something that they're passionate about, just being able to communicate it.
Rob, what would you add?
I would kind of emphasize having something that they're passionate about. To me, that's a key thing.
So passion.
Because if they're not passionate about anything, what they're going to be passionate about.
I'd agree.
So to me, that's a big thing. And also to, obviously depending on the years of experience, but within the role that you're doing, there must be some sort of relevance. And the relevance is not the same programming language, but maybe, a problem that was similar that was solved before. Just something that you can see that this person can apply their personal skills and experiences that they've developed to the job that you need to do. Now, it's a fluffy statement and very subjective in terms of how you measure it. But, that's what you want. You want people who can adapt, who can learn and have passion on something. To me, those are some very key things. One other thing I just want to throw in here, I forgot something on our previous point, is an area that I'm quite passionate about is hiring diverse people. And diverse people, not just
come up there, Rob. Can you share data-driven approaches in unlocking diversity within your work environments?
So, no, is the question. We don't have enough data, unfortunately, around that. But, I'm neurodivergent. My son, as I mentioned earlier on, is on the autistic spectrum. So I have a keen interest in unlocking this great potential of neurodiverse people in the workplace. And coming back to the tick boxes, very often people who are non-typical find it very hard to get through that interview stage. They maybe not making eye contact. They may be fidgeting with a glass all the time because that's how they can keep focus. Or they might be doing things that are slightly just outside of the typical of the people that they've been employed. So again, when you come to these core things like, are they passionate about something? Is there something they're interested in? Can they apply some problem solving? Those kind of criteria transcend whether you're neurotypical, whether you're neurodivergent, whatever your status is, whether you grew up in a rural setting or whether you grew up in an urban location. Those things are kind of common to that.
Thank you.
And
Vicky?
it's interesting that there are certain other departments, even like within FinTech, which seem to be embrace neural divergence a lot more than data. I definitely find that there's, I think the software engineering community has fully embraced and is, I think probably the hardest place to be there is more on the gender and minority scale than being neurodivergent. But yeah, I think it's you need to make sure that your panels that you are having as interview, you look for someone like yourself. I was very lucky when I ran my data science team. We got it up to it was 100 people at its height. We were 50% male, 50% female throughout the entire organisation at every single level. It was one of the things that I was so proud of. And that was because we made sure, and we had, all the different nationalities. We had neurodivergent people. We had people with disability. It was because it was represented, they could see themselves working there. So it was, that made it an easier place for them to apply to. Yep. But yeah, going back to characteristics, the curiosity, and it used to be like, could you go for a drink with them at the pub? Which is more to do with like the communication side of things. So it's, you can follow a logical pattern of their thought, I think is, especially in the world of data and tech, is really, really important. If you can't follow kind of roughly where they're thinking, then you're going to be on a bit of a funny track. And then communication is just like, it doesn't necessarily, the neural normality, but it means that you're able to articulate your points well. I think that is very important in a data role, because it's all about translation of business challenges to data challenges. We are translators.
Okay. And I would also say that there is a job to be done. It's not a charity. It's not, although if you can grow people in their career, that's great. But, you do have a Java code base you need to look at. You do have some Python models that you need to build some sort of control over. So, but it mustn't be one of these 5 languages, this kind of thing. The role needs to specify the core skill, and quite often on a job spec, and coming back to the tick boxes, and managers evaluated this, and sometimes they have these nice to haves. Nice to haves should be removed.
Yes,
from the job specification.
I completely agree, sir. Yes, remove them.
I've reframed them as interesting areas that you can work with, or things that you can learn.
Yeah. It's one of the first conversations I ever have when somebody comes to me and says, we're looking for, I say, right, fine, take that and divide it up into needs and wants.
Yes.
All the wants, throw them away. Tell me what they need. Gordon, I'm going to finish off with you on that main tick boxes, if there's anything that hasn't been mentioned already that you look for, because if not, I've got another question for you.
Okay.
But is there anything else you would look for?
I'd underline the learning thing. I think the pace of change, particularly in data and tech, is just rapid. So if somebody doesn't have a real desire to continuously learn new things, new tools, new technologies, then that's got to be a number one. I think Vicky said communication. I think so often my data scientists were in with the chief marketing officer or chief digital officer, so being able to explain with passion what they're up to and be curious and collaborate with people, they're my kind of wish list of people, and have some sort of specialism to hang on to and kind of be your foundation. I think is important.
So hold that thought, because I'm going to move on to another section.
Mostly because it's a data discussion on the data-driven approaches of unlocking diversity. Something that we have launched within Experian is actually capturing a lot of different types of diversity anonymously across the organization. We're not talking just gender diversity, we're talking about military background, we're talking about ethnic background, we're talking about religion, sex orientation, whether the family has been educated or not, whether someone is the first one to graduate, and so on. This is completely voluntary, but this has been run across Experian just to make sure that the workforce represents the population, because that allows us to be better.
Really cool.
It's quite an interesting initiative.
Gordon, first thing I'm going to do is point out the time, sir.
Yeah,
okay.
So I need to leave before my car gets locked up.
Yeah,
I think.
so we're going to move on here. So this is leveraging technology and data solutions to meet your customers' needs. Subheading, now we're cooking with gas, but are we cooking what people want to eat? Okay. Question to you, sir, before you get ready to leave us. Is the biggest challenge productionizing and deploying products quickly enough to ensure that you meet customer demand before the market becomes mature and saturated? How does the data technology piece feed into this mission? And I stole this question after listening to you talk. So, trying to get things up and running before the market becomes saturated. How do you do it?
That's great. I think you need to, like, in an organisation of ours, you need to start. You need to be ahead a little bit.
How do you do that? How do you get ahead?
Well, I think that. So again, that bit we talked about. So start with something, and evolve it, I guess. So we started with something which has grown into something completely different, right? So we believe now that on our own we won't be able to develop or meet what we're trying to do from a customer point of view. So what we've started to look at is how can we collaborate with other organisations that we know have similar aims, and then almost like we've created this platform which will allow us to share data with each other, so we can get to like a deeper level of collaboration and co-creation. Now we don't know, that might go nowhere and we might kill it, but we think that whether it's using Snowflake as a kind of data clean room and then be able to offer things back out through bank of APIs, that might be some way to go, but we recognise that there's a range of things and capabilities we want to create to help customers' financial well-being, and we know that we need to get there fast, so we will try to do it with our teams mobilised around it, but we think there's some neat areas where we can collaborate with other organisations. So we're starting to kind of think outside ourselves, and actually how do you partner and work with others, because then I think that you get some healthy tension around how you work together, but you'll get people thinking about it one way, and that kind of cross-pollination of ideas will be a great way to drive
it starts
innovation.
off with that customer experience, so the desire to serve the customer, which then means that you're going to have to move at a certain pace, which then means you're going to have to form a strategy which may or may not involve partnerships, and it's all about pushing towards that end goal.
And take some bets.
Right, okay, and some risks.
Definitely, you've got to take a punt.
We're taking some bets around some of this stuff, that, and you've got to, how do you demonstrate success along the way so you can continue to get some backing and support.
Right, okay. Vicky, biggest challenge,
I think is that you've got to take some punts and you've got to make a stand to have your USP. So with Zumo's very focused on the decarbonisation agenda, especially with crypto. Everyone loves to sort of slate crypto with the amount of electricity it uses for the mining. So we have made a very clear stand on where we are with that decarbonisation project. And then also, you know, we're not just another crypto wallet. It is about trying to make the blockchain available to everyone. So it is an education piece, which again sets us out slightly differently from the market. Now, did we know that was going to be 100% successful? No. But so it's been lucky that both of those things have landed at the right time. So we're now, because we've got a B2B offering, helping organisations with decarbonisation and ESG agendas, allowing them to have kind of like crypto as part of their offering as well. So partnering with some other organisations doing that. So yeah, take a punt.
Take a punt. Rob, anything to add?
I was talking about evergreen software development recently, and I used an analogy which kind of applies here, that you can't boil the ocean in terms of coming up with what you need to do to get this product out or this idea out, and it comes to this, you know, what we were saying earlier about taking risks. You know, and the analogy was kind of like the early traders who would leave Europe to go to the Far East to get treasures, wherever they were, silk or spices or whatever these treasures were. They had no idea what challenges they would face, what languages, what violence and political things. So how did they prepare themselves for this unknown journey? And you know, they needed a vision, they needed something that they wanted to do, but they needed to almost equip themselves for the unknown. And to some degree, it's the same thing with this kind of journey, is that you need to have something clear, like a North Star that you're working towards, but know that things might change, and that you kind of need to constantly refactor your plan all the time. And sometimes the treasure you discover is not the treasure you set out to discover. So keep your minds open to these kind of things. And I think if you are allowed to follow that kind of strategy, I think magical things can happen.
Poetry, sir, poetry. Marilena, can you follow that?
Yeah, the other thing, obviously talking about market being saturated, is don't wait until the market is saturated. As in,
Yeah,
no,
just
like,
don't.
I can use like buy now, pay later.
Yeah.
Now a lot of the bigger banks are launching similar products. Market is saturated, they don't have the same take-up rate.
Yeah.
Although the customer need is there, the willingness is there, they've already gone with some fintechs that they are now dominating the space. Similar with other areas, like from Spotify to Netflix and so on, it takes effort to dethrone someone. And that's one of the key points of having a diverse workforce. I wouldn't have guessed some of the trends. Other people in the organization would have. Not everyone is focusing on the same things, not everyone is following the same trends, not everyone is interested in the same things. So the more diverse the team, the organization, the easier it is to spot those upcoming trends before everyone else gets on them and creates products.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I've got a quick question to ask. You gave one good example of actually solving the problem of delaying a product into market. I just wanted to find out from you as well if there's another good example to show how you can put a product into market quicker, because I think it lies down to the problems and people not understanding where the problems come from that causes the delay.
I would kind of come in here that I've had a lot of hard lessons being too quick to market with certain things. I remember I resigned my job as an accountant that I remembered, or trainee accountant early on, and the partner was saying to me, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go build commercial websites. I'm going to be selling subscriptions. I'm going to be doing that. It didn't last for very long because it was a great idea, but people were looking for other things at the time. But you need, and I suppose this is where knowledge of the market that you want to engage with is so important, is that you actually have the problem that they want now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where people like Netflix were great, is because people were at that maturity of saying, well, I want to watch TV when I want to watch TV. And there was a need, and they delivered that need then. They didn't solve all the problems.
Yeah.
They kind of evolved their product over time from something that was really very, very basic to something that's a lot more complex today.